The challenge. The Galactic Union's War Council chamber was a grand, imposing structure, its vaulted ceilings lined with banners from 100 species, each one a proud testament to their military dominance. At the center of it all stood High General Zarkis of the Zarkari Empire, a towering reptilian warrior clad in ornate battle armor. His deep, guttural laughter echoed through the hall as he addressed the representatives of Earth. Humans, Zarkis sneered, his slit-pupil eyes narrowing. You fragile little primates stumble around your own cities. You trip over your own feet, and now you expect to hold your own in warfare. The Galactic Union had long debated humanity's place in their hierarchy. Though Earth's technology had advanced enough to earn them a seat at the table, their warriors were dismissed as clumsy, weak, and lacking discipline. No matter how many times human diplomats cited historical wars, tactical ingenuity, or battlefield endurance, the Union's warlords remained unconvinced. Zarkis leaned forward, his armored claws clinking against the table. Perhaps you need a lesson in humility. Send your best warrior against my forces. We shall see how long he lasts. The room fell silent. Humanity's representatives, previously measured in their responses, exchanged looks before Admiral Catherine Langley, Earth's military delegate, spoke. Very well, she said calmly. We accept. The warlords murmured among themselves, some amused, others intrigued. Even Zarkis seemed momentarily taken aback. Then prepare your funeral rites, human, Zarkis chuckled. We shall hold this test on Xantor 9. Your warrior will face my finest soldiers. His task? To infiltrate our forward base and disable its defenses. If he succeeds, I will reconsider my stance. Langley merely nodded. We'll see you on the battlefield. Earth's answer. Deep in a classified military installation on Earth, Master Sergeant Daniel Briggs sat across from a team of high-ranking officers, listening to the mission briefing. Briggs was a Green Beret, a veteran of countless covert operations, a man whose skills had been honed in the harshest environments on Earth. He had survived wars, insurgencies, and operations that never made it to the history books. Now he was being asked to fight an entirely different kind of war. Admiral Langley stood at the head of the table, the holographic display behind her flickering with images of Xantor 9, a jungle-covered, high-gravity world with a hostile environment and an even more hostile enemy presence. Your objective is simple, she said. Infiltrate their forward base. Disable their defenses. Prove them wrong. Briggs nodded. Simple, at least in theory. Another officer spoke up. The Zarkari rely on strict battle formations. They expect clean, structured warfare. They won't be prepared for asymmetric combat. That's where you come in. Briggs leaned back in his chair. The Zarkari thought humans were clumsy? Let's see how they handled a little chaos. Insertion. 3 days later, the mission was underway. Briggs sat in the cramped confines of an orbital drop pod, his gears secured tightly against his body. The countdown timer flashed red inside his visor. 10 seconds. Outside, the vast expanse of space gave way to the swirling green storms of Xantor 9's atmosphere. The planet's dense jungles stretched across its surface like an endless sea of emerald. Somewhere down there, Zarkis' soldiers were waiting, confident, complacent. The drop pod shook violently as it entered the atmosphere. Fire licked at the edges of the reinforced hull. Briggs exhaled slowly, steadying his nerves. He had done worse insertions before. 3 seconds. The pod's external thrusters fired, slowing its descent. The targeting HUD inside his helmet displayed a clearing just outside the Zarkari patrol zones. Perfect. 1 second. With a deafening impact, the pod slammed into the jungle floor, kicking up a cloud of dirt and leaves. The hatch burst open, and Briggs moved, swift, controlled. His first breath of Xantor 9's air was thick, humid, tinged with the scent of damp vegetation. The gravity was heavier than Earth's, but manageable. He checked his gear, a suppressed pistol, combat knife, ration packs, and a small device for electronic sabotage. He had what he needed. His visor's motion tracker pinged. Zarkari patrol, 300 meters out. They would investigate the crash site soon. He needed to move. Time to show them what Clumsy really looked like. Into the fire. Briggs moved fast, keeping low as he slipped into the dense jungle. The thick canopy above filtered the faint green light of Xantor, Nine's twin moons, casting long shadows across the forest floor. Every step was calculated, silent, precise. His heartbeat was steady, his breathing controlled. He checked his visor. The Zarkari patrol was closing in. 5 hostiles, heavily armed, moving in tight formation. They weren't expecting resistance, just another routine sweep for debris. Briggs smirked. They had no idea they were already dead. First contact. The Zarkari were bipedal reptilians, nearly 8 feet tall, their thick armored hides giving them a natural advantage in physical combat. Their rifles, sleek plasma-based weapons, hummed faintly in the humid air. Briggs flattened himself against a tree as the patrol passed by. 5 targets. He needed to take them down quietly. He drew his combat knife, adjusting his grip. As the last Zarkari moved past, Briggs struck like a ghost. A swift, brutal motion. His knife plunged into the gap between the alien's armor plates, severing the spinal cord. He caught the body before it fell, lowering it soundlessly to the ground. 1 down. The others moved forward, unaware. Briggs retrieved the Zarkari sidearm, a compact plasma pistol, and aimed. A hissing shot burned through the next soldier's skull before he could react. The remaining 3 turned, startled, but Briggs was already gone, slipping into the underbrush. Contact. Hostile. One of them barked in their guttural tongue before Briggs triggered a makeshift trap, a severed Zarkari rifle wired to a tripwire. A plasma burst tore through the leader's chest. The last 2 soldiers panicked, firing wildly into the trees. Briggs flanked them, knifing one in the throat before grabbing the final Zarkari from behind. With a brutal twist, he snapped the alien's neck. Silence returned to the jungle. 5 dead. No alarms raised. Briggs exhaled. He had disrupted their patrol schedule, but now they would start noticing missing units. Time to move. Infiltration. Briggs navigated through the jungle, using his HUD's thermal imaging to track movement. The Zarkari base loomed ahead, nestled between a cliffside and a massive river. He studied their defenses. Automated turrets, motion sensors, patrol drones. It was a fortress, but one built to defend against conventional armies, not a lone operator. Briggs grinned. Their mistake. He crawled through a shallow marsh, coating himself in mud to reduce his heat signature. A guard tower stood 30 meters away, a lone sentry perched atop. Briggs retrieved his suppressed pistol. 1 shot. The sentry slumped over the railing, lifeless. He scaled the tower silently, retrieving the Zarkari's ID chip from his armor. This was his ticket inside. Using the stolen ID, he approached a maintenance access point, scanning the chip against the security panel. A brief pause, then the door hissed open. Briggs stepped inside, disappearing into the base. Tactical sabotage. Inside, the air was sterile, metallic, the opposite of the jungle outside. Briggs moved through the corridors, avoiding patrols, planting small explosive charges at key structural points. The command center was his main target. If he could disable their communication systems, the base would be blind to outside reinforcements. He reached a security terminal, accessing the base schematics. He uploaded a malware program, a simple human-crafted virus that would shut down their cameras and scramble their logs. The lights flickered. The Zarkari would notice soon. Time for Phase 2. Briggs moved toward the power generator room, preparing to disable the defenses. He was halfway down the corridor when his HUD flashed red. Alert! Unidentified life signs detected. Briggs ducked behind cover as a squad of Zarkari warriors stormed through the halls. They had found the missing patrol. They knew he was here. Briggs checked his ammo. 7 rounds left in the pistol. 1 knife. 1 shot at survival. He took a breath. Time to remind them what a clumsy human could do. The general's nightmare. Briggs flattened himself against the cold metal wall, his pistol gripped tight. 7 rounds. 1 knife. A whole base of angry reptilians. The Zarkari warriors moved methodically, sweeping the halls with their plasma rifles. Their hive-mind coordination made them predictable, but also relentless. The patrol leader, a hulking brute with scarred scales, sniffed the air and barked something in his guttural language. The others spread out, covering exits, cutting off escape routes. They knew a human was inside. Briggs exhaled. Time to go loud. Guerrilla warfare in a metal box. He tossed a small distraction charge down the corridor. It wasn't a grenade, just a hissing, sparking chunk of metal. But the Zarkari flinched, turning toward it. That was all he needed. Briggs moved fast. His first shot took out the closest warrior, a plasma bolt tearing through the alien's helmet. He pivoted, fired twice more, 2 more down. The leader roared, raising his rifle, too slow. Briggs was already moving. He ducked low, closed the distance, and drove his knife into the Zarkari's side, twisting viciously. The alien let out a choking hiss before crumpling to the floor. The last soldier bolted for the alarm. Briggs yanked the fallen leader's sidearm and fired. A perfectly placed shot to the back of the skull. Silence. Briggs took a deep breath, wiping the sweat from his brow. The Zarkari had underestimated him. Now, they were afraid. But this was just the beginning. The psychological war begins. Briggs knew brute force wouldn't win this fight. He needed to make the Zarkari doubt themselves. He dragged the bodies into a supply closet, making it seem as if they had simply vanished. He smeared some of their own bioluminescent blood on the walls, jagged streaks, as if something had dragged them away. Then, he hacked into the base-wide comm system. Using the Zarkari's own language files, he distorted the playback, static-filled whispers, garbled voices, the occasional ragged breathing. He fed them fear. Within minutes, panic spread through the base. Zarkari soldiers whispered about an invisible enemy, something they couldn't track, couldn't predict. Some fired wildly at shadows. Others broke formation, a death sentence for a species that relied on unity. Briggs grinned. Now they were playing his game. Close call. As Briggs moved toward the reactor core, his HUD flashed red again. New life sign detected. He barely had time to react before something huge slammed into him, sending him sprawling across the floor. Briggs rolled to his feet, raising his pistol, only to have it swatted away by a massive clawed hand. Before him stood a Zarkari commander, nearly 9 feet tall, wearing thick powered combat armor. This wasn't a standard soldier. This was an elite enforcer. "You think you're the hunter, human?" the commander hissed. "You are nothing but prey." Briggs didn't answer. He moved. The first strike came fast, a sweeping claw meant to tear him in half. Briggs sidestepped, barely avoiding the lethal swipe. The second strike followed immediately, a devastating punch that sent him crashing into a metal console. Pain exploded through his ribs. Something cracked. Not good. The Zarkari lunged again, but Briggs was ready. He rolled under the attack, grabbed a fallen plasma rifle, and fired point-blank at the commander's knee. The alien roared, stumbling. Briggs capitalized. He launched himself forward, slamming his combat knife into the Zarkari's exposed throat. The commander gurgled, clawing at his neck, but it was over. Briggs twisted the blade and ripped it free. The massive warrior collapsed, lifeless. Briggs coughed, feeling the sharp ache in his ribs. That had been too close. No time to dwell. The reactor core was just ahead. Sabotage and the final stand. Briggs limped into the reactor chamber. The humming core powered the base's shields and defenses, exactly what he needed to disable. He placed explosive charges at the main conduit, setting a 5-minute timer. That would be enough time to escape. But as he turned to leave, the doors slammed shut. The overhead speakers crackled. "I must admit, human, I did not expect you to get this far." "General Zarkis." Briggs gritted his teeth. He knew this wasn't over. "You are clever," Zarkis continued, his voice calm. "But you are still just one man. My forces are closing in. You cannot win." Briggs exhaled slowly. Then he smirked. "That's the thing about humans, General." He adjusted his gear, cracking his knuckles. "We don't need to win." The timer ticked down. 4 minutes left. He raised his rifle. Let them come. Victory, the human way. Briggs stood in the reactor chamber, rifle raised, heart pounding, but steady. The distant echoes of boots striking metal corridors signaled the arrival of Zarkari reinforcements. His timer ticked down, 3 minutes until detonation. The overhead speakers crackled again. "You are cornered, human," General Zarkis' voice sneered through the intercom. "Surrender, and I will grant you a swift death." Briggs scoffed, checking his ammo. 4 shots left. He glanced at his knife. Still sharp. "Appreciate the offer, General," he said, his voice calm. "But I think I'll pass." The doors hissed open. 6 armored Zarkari warriors stormed in, weapons raised. Briggs moved. The last stand. His first shot took out the lead warrior, a plasma bolt straight through the visor. Before the others could react, Briggs lunged forward, closing the distance. A second Zarkari swung a brutal backhand, but Briggs ducked, driving his knife into the alien's exposed side. The warrior howled, collapsing. The remaining soldiers adjusted, firing in tight bursts. Briggs dove behind a reactor conduit, plasma shots scorching the walls. He checked the timer, 2 minutes left. No more time for drawn-out fights. He retrieved his last distraction charge and threw it. As the device exploded in a blinding flash, Briggs rushed forward, firing his remaining shots. 3 more Zarkari dropped. The last warrior charged him, roaring in rage. Briggs met him head-on, slipping past a wild swing and slamming his knife through the alien's jaw. Silence. The only sounds were Briggs's ragged breathing and the hum of the reactor. He checked his HUD. 30 seconds left. Time to move. A warrior's final lesson. As Briggs reached the exit, the final door sealed shut. A slow, deliberate clanking echoed through the chamber. General Zarkis stepped forward. Unlike his soldiers, Zarkis wore elaborate battle armor, his scales gleaming under the reactor's dim light. He held no weapon. "You fight well, human," Zarkis admitted, his tone colder now. "But brute force will not save you. This is over." Briggs smirked. He had heard that before. "If you really believe that, General, you wouldn't be down here yourself." Zarkis' eyes narrowed. Then he lunged. Briggs barely dodged as a clawed fist shattered the metal panel behind him. The Zarkari General was faster than he looked. Zarkis swung again. Briggs sidestepped, landing a brutal punch to the alien's ribs. Zarkis didn't flinch. A second later, Briggs was airborne, his ribs exploding in pain as Zarkis' massive tail sent him crashing into a control panel. Not good. Zarkis stalked forward. "Your kind relies on tricks. Deception. But in the end, strength wins wars." Briggs spat blood, forcing himself up. "Funny. Your soldiers were strong. They're dead. Maybe you're next." Zarkis snarled and charged again. This time, Briggs didn't dodge. At the last moment, he pivoted, grabbing a loose power conduit from the broken panel. Sparks exploded as he jammed it into Zarkis' side. The Zarkari General roared in agony, electricity surging through his body. Briggs didn't stop. He tackled Zarkis into the reactor control station, sending them both crashing into a heap. He grabbed his knife. One quick, brutal motion, he drove it deep into Zarkis' throat. The general gurgled, his massive frame shuddering. Briggs leaned close. "You talk too much." With a final twist of the blade, Zarkis fell still. The timer hit 0. Briggs barely had time to sprint for the emergency hatch before the reactor exploded behind him. The aftermath. Briggs emerged into the jungle just as the entire Zarkari base went up in flames. The night sky lit up with fire and debris. In the distance, he saw the Zarkari fleet breaking formation, their command structure in chaos. He tapped his comm, "Mission complete," requesting exfil. A pause. Then Admiral Langley's voice came through. "Copy that, Sergeant. We've been watching. Good work." Briggs exhaled, sinking to one knee. His body ached, his armor was scorched, and he was covered in alien blood. But he had won. Humanity had won. Epilogue. A message to the galaxy. Days later, in the Galactic Union War Council, the remaining Zarkari leaders sat in stunned silence as Earth's ambassador played the final footage from the battle. The burning remains of their base, the dead body of High General Zarkis, and Briggs's final transmission to the Zarkari fleet. "You called us clumsy. You underestimated us. Don't make that mistake again." The Union was silent. Then, after a long pause, the warlords acknowledged Earth's military prowess. Humanity was no longer a second-rate species. They were warriors. As the meeting adjourned, Admiral Langley sent Briggs a simple message. "Congratulations, Sergeant. You just rewrote galactic history." Briggs, sitting in a dimly lit military outpost, smirked as he took another sip of coffee.